Your direct reports are going to tell you everything you need to know for you to be a great leader and manager for them, if only you ask the right questions, and most importantly, you listen from the right framework.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. This week, we're really in store for a treat. I'm joined by Mark Watson. Mark is a former coaching client who has built an extraordinary business and investment mini empire in, of all places, Searcy, Arkansas, and the outlying areas with that. Mark has built, as a serial entrepreneur, a chain of gyms that he's sold, and he's built a property management company, and he's built real estate brokerage companies, a self-storage miniature empire, a commercial real estate portfolio. He's done some really great things. And in the course of that, this conversation, Mark and I dive deep into how do you effectively manage the team that you have. And as we get into that, we're going to talk about one of the biggest myths. We call this the mirror myth. Managing people like that as if they're like us is wrong, and how to spot and listen and hear the cues for what is the best way to inspire and hold somebody else accountable. Matter of fact, I asked Mark in the first 10 minutes of the podcast, I asked him what motivates him and how does he like to be held accountable? And you'll watch me model how, if I were his manager or I was his boss, how would I have heard what he said to be a better leader and manager of him? And I think you'll find that a really useful exercise. We also go in there and talk about the blind spots that we have, and the biggest mistake we make, where we can sometimes chase away our very best people with unintended behaviors. All that and more is in this episode of The Business Coach. Without further ado, please welcome in here and join me with my conversation with Mark Watson. Well, Mark, I'm so glad you could join me back again on the podcast. How goes things today in Searcy?
Things in Searcy are good. We've got the seasons are changing. The leaves hadn't started changing colors yet, but they're getting close. And it's my favorite season of the year. Moving into the fall and winter months are wonderful in Arkansas. The summer heat it's not gone yet, but it's working on being gone.
Oh, that's good. You know, it always amazes me. People, I think we have this bias, comes in the media that way. And we think of businesses, we think about, Silicon Valley and New York City, and like anywhere else is, maybe you think of Austin or you think of Chicago, but you ignore that there are hundreds of thousands of immensely profitable businesses, so many other parts of the country that are going on with that part. Do you ever get a little bit of a smile, a secret smile when you're talking to someone, you're traveling? Like, I know you're going to be joining us in Hawaii for the Success Summit this year again, and you're out there on your way there and someone says, oh, you're from Arkansas. Do you ever get I get funky looks now that I live in Wyoming. Like, people say, is Wyoming a place? Like they've never even heard of it, or they've never really thought of it as a state. I'm curious, do you get that about Arkansas a little bit?
Oh, all the time. My wife and I were just in New York City and on Long Island this last weekend, and people would say, where are you from? I'd say, I'm from Arkansas. And they're like, where's that? And I'm like, it's next to Texas. No, okay, yeah. We've got it figured out. But yeah, Arkansas, I mean, we've got a couple little companies here like Walmart, Tyson Foods. There's some big boys in Arkansas, but for the most part, we fly under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing at that part, right? There was this old commercial that had about picante sauce, and they said, "Where's it made? New York City," right?
Yeah.
It seems that way. Like, I get Jackson, I have to tell people, because they don't know Jackson, I would say Yellowstone National Park. That's 45 minutes away, and they go, "Okay, Yogi Bear." Like, when I travel overseas, I say Yogi Bear, and they go,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I know where you're from."
Got it.
Let's talk today. I know we're going to have this conversation about managing people, and that's an important one. And I know you've done it throughout your career with multiple businesses. Let's start off with this question here about lessons you and I have learned the hard way about managing our respective teams. For you, it might be back when you owned your gyms, your fitness gyms, or when you're doing some construction management projects, or with your real estate brokerage company, or even with your investment firm. I'm curious, I want you to think about, I'll share one first, the mistakes that you learned the hard way about how to correct. And I'll give an example. I had an earlier coaching business before Maui Mastermind, and it was a successful company. We scaled it, but I was just so young and dumb. I remember that as the business started growing, Mark, I wanted to evangelize and save the world from living an ordinary life. And I took it upon myself to help people really believe on growing and developing themselves. And at the time before I had kids, I was reading or listening to like 100 or more audio learning books a year in addition to the fiction. And I remember a woman we worked with, her name was Paige, and I remember trying to inspire her this way. And what I really did is I destroyed a relationship. Why? Because some people didn't want to grow that way. And it was really paternalistic of me at the time. I was a 30-year-old young man trying to tell this, capable grown woman about how she should grow in self-development. And I realized I have to meet people where they're at versus trying to pretend that people are like me at that stage. Even the me of today, 25 years later, looks back and thinks at 55, I would have found that 30-year-old obnoxious, a know-it-all. And I laugh about that. I'm curious, what was one of the things you had to learn the hard way?
I think that one thing that comes to mind is that the concept of the mirror myth, where you expect that the people that you're working with, that you're interacting with, will be much like you perceive yourself. They're going to have the same growth ambitions that you have. They're going to have, probably the harder part for me was they're going to have the ways that I like to be held accountable, or the ways that everybody will like to be held accountable. And that was probably the first that I learned, was that the way to hold your team accountable can look very different than how it would be best suited for you.
As I hear you
I
say
would
that,
say that to say that I wasn't very good at holding people accountable. It was
so
like,
how do
well,
you like to be held accountable? And of course, everyone must be the same. But I'm curious, if we were looking, if I were your coach, how would you tell me to hold you accountable? Because as the owner, it's hard for you to go to a staff member and say, hey, I know I'm the one signing your paycheck or authorizing the payroll, hold me accountable. That's a hard one. How
yeah.
do you like to be held accountable?
Probably for me, it's maybe less about the accountability on, like, are you not doing what you need to be doing, and more about, this is what we need you to be doing. And so I've painted a clear picture on what it is that I could do to create value or add value to the team. I just needed to know the direction I needed to go, and I would be off and running. In addition to that, one of the things that really helped keep me motivated and accountable to do the role well would have been words of affirmation. I don't need a lot of it, but just a little bit of it to say, hey, great job. I noticed you did that. That it's not necessarily hold me accountable, but if you want to keep me on the right track, it was more about those small words of affirmation and clarity that this is the direction that we need you to go in, or this is the hill that we need you to tackle. One of the struggles I had is I felt like I would paint that picture for people on our team, and they weren't taking the hill. And I didn't understand, because for me, I just needed to know that's the hill that we needed to climb. And so there was a lot more learning for me to do on what it looked like to hold people accountable, kind of more on the downside of it.
Yeah.
What's the clarity of what they're responsible for? And if they're not hitting a metric or a number, or an expectation, how are we going to have that conversation? It seemed that it would be obvious to people that they might not be hitting an expectation, but not everybody sees it that way. I found that I had to be much more clear on what our expectations were. I tend to be more broad brushed in expectation, and sometimes it needs a lot more granular thinking and activity, and clarity on the granular side. So those are a few things that I learned early on from the accountability standpoint. But even a second tier of what I learned in working with, leading and managing people was, I think you hit on it a little bit, but it's that idea that I was of the nature that I was always wanting to grow, to learn, to evolve, to change, and one of the concepts we got in working with Maui early on was there's a distinction between a role player and a grow player. And it's important to identify those on your team that are grow players and those that are role players. One's not necessarily better than the other or worse than the other. They're both essential to a good team, but the way that you're going to coach and work with somebody who's a grow player looks very differently than that's a role player. And
Finish your thought there,
I
Mark, and
like
then I want
you
to come
got a
back.
guy to quit. I got a guy to quit because we were just trying to grow him, and we were so excited about his growth plans, and it put him in a world that he was so uncomfortable that he decided to give his notice. So I've had similar experiences in growing people out of the company accidentally.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to four things that you said I want to start off with the mirror myth first, but something you said there before I jump into these things, when I asked, how did you like to be held accountable? It was interesting. Your comment was, you want someone who can really hold up a mirror to help you see where you are, what you're doing, and is it really adding value, to help make sure that there's a gut check for you that are you doing things that are adding value. So what you've just let us know is your recipe for you is that if I were managing you, Mark, in a business, I would know that you really are motivated by adding value. So if I needed to help shift behavior for you to stop doing something that doesn't make sense, I'm not going to come to you and say, hey, stop this autocratically. I'm going to say, hey, Mark, I know it's important for you to add value, and you have some gifts that the company needs. You're currently putting them here, but where we need them are here and here. And for you, that would work well. And I point that out because any of our audience right now, you're learning in the coaching for you that your direct reports are going to tell you everything you need to know for you to be a great leader and manager for them, if only you ask the right questions, and most importantly, you listen from the right framework. I shouldn't be figuring this out. And so, Mark, it's interesting. I'm a lot like you. For me, it wouldn't be just adding value, but like, how do I want to be held accountable? I just need someone who's going to see what I do, because if I know someone I care about and respect is going to see what I do, I'm going to perform really well.
Right.
I don't need them to say anything even about it. The fact that they know, like if I tell my leadership team by Friday you'll have X, I'm going to break my back here to do whatever I need to do to meet the commitment. Or if I can't, I'm going to own it and get it to them on Monday morning in some fashion with that part. I think there's a lot of similarity there, but you just gave us a recipe to how to manage you if we know you about your value hierarchy. What I don't want to do for someone like you is I don't want to come in there and say you autocratically, you have to do this, you have to do that, because that's going to piss you off. That's going to push you away. And going back to, you said number one, this mirror myth. I can think of a lot of people in my business, and I'm curious if you have talked about here about this, some of the people that you have to be careful. This is the second comment that I wanted to come back to. You talked about broad brush. You need the big picture, and you're going to take it down yourself to the granular level. But a lot of the team members, both you and I work with in our past, they've needed a much greater level of detail to build from the bottom up. Hey, until I can see the big picture, but I need the granular details to understand this. Whereas you and I, if you give us the big picture, we'll fill in the other blanks, right? We're going to do that. And that works for some people, but not for others. So coming back to the mirror myth, I can think of the people in my company where I thought I gave them exactly what they needed to be successful on a project or a responsibility. But what I really gave them was a big picture. And what I found out after this fact was that they couldn't fill in the blanks. They needed bottom up picture, the ground level. This is what it looks like on the ground. I don't know if that's something you've noticed, because I think you and I have a lot of similarity about how we think and approach and do business together.
Yeah, I think so. And as you say that, the concept of a person who works well in ambiguity is something that I know you and I have talked about in the past. And working directly with me, for some, it feels like working in ambiguity because I'm looking more at this is where we are and this is where we're going. And it just seems clear that you go from this point to this point, but there's this myriad of steps along the way that I will tend to just broad brush right over the. And some people need more definitive steps to get from A to B to C. And so that concept of someone that can work well in ambiguity is easier for me to work with. Ones that need more quote unquote hand holding or very specific direction can be more challenging for me to learn to work with well and to hold them accountable and to motivate them. And so, and I think some of it's building the team around you. Sometimes it's good to know that about yourself so that then as you're looking to build your team, you might be building it with a team that works well with your leadership style. I think that's at least a component of it.
When you said for you that you're motivated at times with some words of affirmation, hey, Mark, I just wanted to tell you when you delivered X, you did a great job with that, but you don't need a lot of it. It's interesting. Mark, I remember we were coaching a person, I'll call this person Rob, name doesn't matter. And Rob said to me, I still remember this conversation, people don't need to hear they're doing a good job. They know if they're doing a good job. And I smiled and I said, so what I'm hearing from you, Rob, is that you really don't need to hear, hey, you've done a great job on this, correct? Got it. Now, do you believe that everyone in the world is the same way as you? Or do you think there might be even a small subsection or more people who really do benefit from or thrive under hearing that they're doing good work? Well, I guess some people might want to hear it. Okay, I tell you what, you open for an experiment. This is one I often will use with people, Mark, an experiment. I say, why don't you try for the next 30 days? Why don't you try where you share when you notice someone doing something well, 2 or 3 times each week, you're going to point that out and just say, great work for different people, 2 or 3 times. Let's not overwhelm you doing it 50 times, just 2 or 3 times. And I remember talking with this guy, and Rob was saying, it's amazing. People really respond to that. It surprises me. I said, you know what? People really are surprising, aren't they, Rob? And, it's this thought of if I don't need it, other people don't. Like, I don't tend to need words of affirmation. What I really find that for me is when someone listens through to what I'm sharing and then they put it into practice, that for me is so affirming just by watching the translation of what I've shared into them doing. But there's a lot of people that I would say that are completely different than that. They want to hear it, they want to see it. So for me, Mark, I don't know about you, but I actually had to cheat for years to learn the habit where I would carry and I would have my day timer. Nowadays, I use a bullet journal, and I would put these little check boxes that were empty for me giving positive strokes for team members that were deserved. And I would literally check the box to push myself to start retraining myself to look for it. How can I this week find 3 legitimate places where I can share with one of, whether it be my direct reports or their direct reports or anybody, these positive words? And I found that it's now become a habit 10, 15 years later that I do it much more frequently as a habit. I'm curious if you had to work with that, or does that come natural? Because I know words of affirmation are meaningful to you in a way that's different me. My language is different for what motivates me. Hi, everybody. David here. And I wanted to step out of the podcast for a quick moment and tell you about an exciting new opportunity for you. For over a year and a half, my staff and I have been working on simplifying a toolkit for business owners. This toolkit I wanted to make available for you for free. It's called our Business Growth Toolkit. And I think it's the best thing we've done for at least a decade. It's the 6 most popular business growth tools we have. Each of those tools, which is a PDF that you can download, comes with a short 5 to 10 minute explanation video from me showing and training you exactly how to use those tools right away to start scaling your sales, improving your margins, increasing your profitability, and probably most importantly of all, making your business more of a joy to own. It's all there in the Business Growth Toolkit. It's available. Take a look for the link in the show notes, or just go to MauiMastermind.com. That's MauiMastermind.com. Click on the resources section, and you'll have free access to that right there. All right, with that said, let's jump back into this week's podcast episode.
Yeah, that side of it has definitely been something I've had to be proactive in thinking about, giving accolades or affirmation to other folks. By nature, I tend to be, I'll give you an example. I was just looking at a report before we started recording that shows the performance of my facilities over the last 7 days. And frankly, 3 of them were awesome. One of them was like, that's good, that's on plan. And one was just slightly below. And I just go right past all the good things, right to the one that's the red flag. And so if I'm not careful, all my team will hear is, what's going on in XYZ city? I don't understand why we're not meeting the mark. And I'll go right past the fact that 4 of them are crushing it. This is really good. This deserves celebration. I go right to being critically minded for what we need to do to get better. And so it's definitely been something that I've had to work on with our team.
How do you work on it? If you were coaching a business person, what would you tell them to help them work on it? Because I laugh, Mark. My wife says the same thing about me. All you notice, you come home, you didn't notice this, this, and this. You went right to the fact that there was a mess over here. And she's absolutely right. She's flattened me with what she said. I know how I'm hardwired. What's your coaching for someone like me that just doesn't think that way organically?
I think that you got to make space for it. If you know that's a blind spot for you, you have to create some sort of tool that allows the blind spot not to be blind. And so an example of that would be, we do a short team meeting. It's not meant to have a lot of business in it. It's just connecting with our team. And one of the spaces that I'll leave open there is talking about last week's victories. It's just a space for someone to share something that they were proud of, that they felt victorious in. And giving it space in that meeting setting allows me to say, I did see that. That was really well done, Claire. In fact, it was pretty amazing. In fact, that ties right to some of our core values, and use that as an example. And it's easier for me to just get right to the meat of the matter and not allow that 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to say, let's share some victories. And so giving it the space in that way, giving it the space and reporting. Sometimes people don't self-report real well on the victory side. And so being able to just ask the question in a meeting format or in a conversation and just wait on them to come up with something gives me the ability to affirm it. Other things I've looked for is when we're doing our Big Rock reporting, looking for the victories and making notes of those things so that when I see them at the office or the next time I talk to them, I can say, hey, I saw that you said XYZ. Just want you to know that's excellent. That's wonderful.
I love
And
that.
I've had to, it's like anything, you know that it's important. And if you know it's important, you have to make it a priority or set space aside for it. And so we do it in meetings or in reporting.
When you talk about creating space for it, you mentioned something I just want to tell our audience. So Big Rock reports, I mean, you and I know this. So one of the apps we created for our coaching clients has something called the Big Rock report. It's a weekly place for you to put down and your key staff to put down what are the 1 or 2 top priorities, the big rocks for the week. What were your victories from last week? What 1 or 2 challenges from last week? And then another place for any other updates, for a structured place to share that if you don't have it for somewhere else. And so it's interesting, Mark, for me, when I print up the Big Rock report, one of the most important kind of behaviors I've trained myself on is just to find 2 or 3 victories from different team members to just go celebrate. I don't know if you've had this one. My transition from not celebrating a victory at all 15 years ago and being the parent my company could never please to celebrating conditional victories. Oh, Joe, you did a great job on X, but ... And then I got more sophisticated. Yeah. I changed but into and we still need to do this. And what I've learned for the last probably 7 or 8 years now is how do I celebrate a pure victory? Hey, Joe, you did a great job on X. And then I shut up. And if I really need to talk with them about something else, I'll wait, separate it in space and time, an hour, a day, a week, and come back to the other one later so he can actually have at least once or twice this month, gosh, that I've shared a good thing with them.
Yeah, it's an important thing to do. And it's in the work front. It's also in the family front. Recently, my son, he's 13 and he's really a good golfer. And he's playing in this fall golf tour. And I'm his caddy, which is a whole new thing to learn about being. What's it look like to be a good caddy for your 13-year-old son? But he won a tournament a couple weeks ago. And I've seen something or read something recently that just reminded me that winning a tournament's a big deal. That's a hard thing to accomplish. You might not win one for years. Like on the PGA, these guys play their whole careers and might not win one ever. And so if you do, it deserves celebration. So my natural thing to say is, boy, I know you shot a 74, but we left about 4 strokes out there. We could have got that down to a 70. And so to be able to end that and celebrate it with him, and then to take it home and say, like, let's just celebrate it. Let's go out to eat. Let's talk about the things that were good. Like, let's enjoy the moment because that was quite an accomplishment. So it's something that I think as I'm getting older, I'm getting more inclined to not just want to celebrate the victories, but to enjoy the celebration as opposed to what do we need to do next?
It's more satisfying that way. And good job, Dad, on the celebration without talking about the 4 strokes he could have had. I can see it. It's coming out of a place of love and wanting him to grow, but your maturity on that, well done. You had said something earlier, the last one I want to come back to, which is this distinction between a role player and a grow player. Tell me a little more about that. I know you and I have spent a lot of time talking about that in the past, but our audience might not know that distinction.
Yeah, so like a role player and a grow player, any business is likely to be made up of several of those types of folks on the team. And so really the distinction is one of the things I had to learn is you can't really go by what somebody says. You know, if they say, oh yeah, of course I want to grow and I want to make it to the next position and I hope to earn more money one day and et cetera, or, oh boy, I just am happy doing what I'm doing. I don't want to change anything. It's one thing to hear what someone's saying, but the most important place in distinguishing the difference in a role player and a grow player is how they behave. Look at their behavior. Look at the way that they like to be held accountable. If they're held accountable, do they get defensive or are they open? Do they have the growth mindset for how to improve versus the fixed mindset of being defensive about where they stand? And so distinguishing the difference is important. But really, once you've distinguished the difference, it has a lot to do with the time, energy, and effort that you're going to spend and how you coach them. The way in which you would coach a grow player might create opportunities where you're more open-ended and you let them try to solve the last two steps of the problem, as opposed to a role player. They're gonna like it a whole lot more if you would just cut to the chase and tell them exactly what they need to do. And so it changes the way that you develop your team. If you have a role player and you continue to try to grow them and maybe help them want to think through the next few steps, that could create a lot of fatigue and mental fatigue on their spot and make them feel unsuccessful in their role when all you're trying to do is help them grow. At the end of the day, they just need to be given more of a directive, and they're excited about that, and they can move on, they can check it off the list, and they've had a successful day.
Yeah.
So understanding the difference in the two, for me, the big distinction there is how am I going to go about coaching them, training them, developing them, and investing in them for growth.
It's interesting as you said this, so tie it back to the mirror myth. You and I are both in general grow people. We want feedback. We welcome that input of outside ideas that will make us grow and be better. We want to try new things, even if it's uncomfortable. A role player tends to the best of them want to grow within the role. The best grow players want to grow beyond the role. And so it's really easy for us to assume everyone else wants to be this way or should be this way, yet that's really paternalistic. That's not what's needed in the workspace. And one's not better than the other, right? We both know that we need fantastic role players because oftentimes they'll be with us for decades and doing really important functions. And you talked about how to coach and manage them. I love that with my grow players, I can be more open-ended was your term. I usually say I ask more questions and let them struggle, but I like the open-ended way you frame that. And with role players, I'm smiling. You said, let's be direct and let's give them the answer. Let's cut to the chase. Let's not make them take 20 minutes. Tell them what you want, tell them why you want it, tell them when you need it by, and tell them what great performance looks like, and let them do that work. Now you'll manage more directly that way versus a grow player. I love this idea that we're going to be open-ended. You said let them figure out the last two steps, or at least try to, so that they grow some muscles with that part. You mentioned that you had someone quit because you were pushing him to be a grow player when he really was a role player. Tell me more about that without telling the details that would upset anybody.
Yeah, super fantastic guy. I met him at one of my kids was having a Valentine's Day party when they were like in kindergarten. Met him sitting on the floor putting together Valentines, and we were needing a repair and maintenance individual for our real estate portfolio. And he had a background in that, and we struck up a conversation. One thing led to another, and he joined us on the team. And he was really great at doing repair and maintenance. Boy, you could put 15 items on the list. He would get out, he would take care of them, he would knock them off the list and keep moving. And so slowly, part of our business was we did more construction. Like if we were doing a tenant finish out job as the landlord, we might have to do the tenant finish out, and we would act as our own GC. And so we started moving him into being less repair and maintenance and more superintendent of a project kind of a situation. And that he took on pretty well and did well with. When we moved him from that into project management, so now he's part of the estimating, he's part of the bidding out the process, he's part of showing up on site and holding other people accountable. He just couldn't handle it. And we thought we were doing him a service by saying, oh, repair and maintenance, and now, site supervisor, now project manager, like the sky's the limit. And that put him in a place that he was really uncomfortable. And so he sought out a role that put him back into being a task, master and just checking off tasks all day long without having to coordinate and work with so many different personalities and contractors. It was really just about him being the technician as opposed to, orchestrating everybody.
Yeah. I want to shift us over here, Mark, which is I want us both to talk for a moment about how we have been surprised at times with someone on our team that we underestimated what they could actually do capability. I think sometimes we, as business, I won't speak for all business owners, I'll speak for myself and the owners that I directly have coached, the several hundred over the last 10, 20 years, probably several thousand actually. And what I found is that there are times we make a snap decision about what someone is capable of, and we don't always change that estimation with the information. And I'll give an example for me, and I'm curious if you've ever had something similar. So there's a team member currently on the Maui team, and my brain said I had put her in a category of what she's capable of. She's a remote team member. She's overseas. She's this, she's that. And yet when we put her into a function, giving her responsibility over various more important stuff, I was watching how our operations leader gave this person a larger role, and she just shined. She took on the collections and the receivables collection side, and she did these other pieces, which said, you know what, I totally underestimated what she was capable of, which was my own preconception. And I think as a leader, sometimes if we can be open to revisiting decisions about people we made once upon a time, sometimes there's a gem that we just didn't notice before in the mass of it. I'm curious if you ever had that happen for you.
Well, I mean, the example that comes to mind is a recent one, and part of it was the individual, but part of it was like for us over the years, largely we've been physically in the same office space.
Yeah.
So when we moved to having remote workers and even overseas workers, in my mind, it was kind of fixed as to how will this even work and what things could they actually do and do well, and what things would they just be totally unsuited for. And so some of it was my growth and understanding, wow, there's a lot more capability out there than I thought in this role. But the person as well, we hired a lady from the Philippines. Her name's Claire, and she's absolutely a 5-star team performer. And we brought her on board to do some of the collections and things associated with storage facilities. And we learned pretty quickly that she was better at leasing the facilities than our on-site folks. And she was doing it from half a world away with English as a second language. She's talking to people in Arkansas that, we can barely speak English ourselves. She had no idea she's in the Philippines. And her conversion rates were far in excess of the people that were physically on site. And so that was an eye opener to say, well, maybe we should give her some more rope to run with there. We were shocked to find out that we had struggled with getting Google reviews. Well, all of a sudden, Claire's rolling in 3 or 4 5-star Google reviews every week. And it was just in a way that she was going about interacting with people over the phone. And so she would be a good example of somebody that she came in one seat and we kind of had in mind, like, this is all this role will be able to do for us. And she just kept proving us wrong by getting small opportunities to prove how good she was. Today she actually runs all of our Zoom phone system, not just for our storage facilities, but for our entire business. And so the amount of value she's created for us has been tremendous. Today, there was an earthquake in the Philippines, and 2 of my remote workers have said, we had an earthquake and we're out of luck. We can't work today. I haven't heard anything from Claire. She's still out there leasing units. So it's just shocking to me. And just the nature of her is pretty special too. She's a unique individual.
Fantastic.
But definitely we had that role and the whole concept of a VE in a box, and she's kind of blown the lid off the box and moved out in ways that are really, really interesting to watch and see and rewarding too.
I'm laughing. I'm wondering if I'm hoping someday to talk with Claire. I'm wondering if she's going to have a little bit of a Cersei twang to her voice in there as she's talking to someone about renting a unit there with that part. Your comment there, I just think what a great example of in a business of a team member that really could climb. That's a grow player, a perfect example. She started off doing one function and she wanted to grow not just to be better at that function, but she wanted to grow beyond that function. And her behavior is what told you that, not what she said. It was her behavior. She handled uncomfortable new and showed that she could come through. And you gave her more. You call it, more rope to run with. And as she did that, she showed more. And now, she's handling things beyond just the storage portion of your portfolio for your business with that. That's wonderful, Mark. Really, it is. Last part I want to go here is I want you to think about this. We're both going to come back here and think, if you had any 2 final coaching suggestions. One of the things about the Business Coach podcast, as you know, is we try to bring it back to behavioral things that some business owner could actually do. One thing to talk about what to do, but how do you do the what to do has always been really important. And so I think what I'd like to do to close out is to have each of us just share our final 2 pieces of coaching input for somebody about how they can manage and lead their staff more effectively, whether it's a staff of 12 or a staff of 1,200, doesn't matter. So I'll start with you. What are the 2 coaching suggestions you have that an audience member can use to help them lead and manage their people more effectively to help their business be more successful?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is when we're looking to hire somebody, we talk a lot about like as we're thinking through the role, is making sure we know how will we know if they've been successful and how will they know if they've been successful. And if that question we ask ourselves is true in the hiring process, it should continually be true as they work with us, right? And so one of the things that's really helped us over the years is to create some sort of a scorecard, might be the best way to describe it, but a scorecard for that role that says, yes, there's 500 things that this job does, if you want to list all this job description stuff out. But there's probably 4 or 5 areas in your role that are the most important pieces. And if we could put some sort of measurable to those, then we could really know, are we delivering the value in the role or not? And so as we've worked to develop scorecards for our team, and we shrink the units of accountability there to either daily or weekly, depending upon the role, but being able to have really clear, it gives them clear expectation as to what success looks like. And it helps them a little bit self-navigate what their day is because they know very clearly what to hit. And so then you're able to work with them to say, okay, if you're hitting these things, this is fantastic, this is wonderful. And if they're not hitting it, then it gives us clarity on saying, okay, what's keeping us from getting there? What can we change to make sure this number is affected positively? Because in their mind, they could be saying, yeah, but I'm doing fantastic at handling customer complaints. Like, see all these people, and they've taken up my entire day. And it's like, well, that is important, but these are the things that we've identified as being the most important. And so being able to create that clarity as to what value in that role looks like, and then keep that as an ongoing accountability piece week over week over week is a huge point. If you don't have that clarity, and if they don't have that clarity, it makes it really difficult to hold somebody accountable to their role. Without that, you're left a little bit with how do you feel about how they're doing and how do they feel about how they're doing? And that can lead to that can lead you to being on 2 different pages in the book really quick. So the scorecard helps keep you on the same page of the book.
I love that. And I'm hearing from you that at the point of hire, you're doing that, which is fantastic. I know those that have been around the Maui community a long time will call it the hiring gold standard, but I love that idea. I put down here, Mark, my first comment for somebody would be, look, listen to your staff. They're going to tell you how to manage them. If you listen to their language, if you've asked a reasonable series of questions about how, what are some of the best managers you've worked with? How do they get the best from you? What do you find makes it easier for you to do your work in an excellent fashion? What does great accountability look like in your world? They're going to tell you how to manage them. And it's not just what they say, it's also the next part, which is paying attention to when you try something, see what the response in them is, right? Really bring it back to that observation. And my last coaching comment is, I think this is one that I've had to learn the hard way here, Mark, which is I need to stay with something long enough with a team member, bringing it back. You talk about your weekly scorecard, which is a phenomenal way for great management. You talk about shrinking the units of accountability, where maybe it's not once a month you talk with them, maybe it's once every 2 weeks or once each week, or even at the end of each day, depending on their ability set. I've noticed for me and for a lot of clients that we coach, they let go too soon of the accountability of the check-in. It's one thing to let go of the responsibility, but that there's abdication, which is we don't even check. There's letting go intelligently, which says based on our whatever unit of accountability the person has demonstrated is appropriate, that I'm in there just to circle back and check. 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, depending if it's in a day, in a week, in a month with that partner. I think for me, that's one that I have to consistently remind myself about. This idea of it's going to be a long-term chronic state of behavior of checking in, not just a once and we're done. The person's going to need that on some regular rhythm over the long term.
That's right. There's something you said there that I really loved, and that's listen, listen, listen. I mean, the best leaders amongst us are oftentimes the best listeners. And there's a reason why that's so important in all forms of leadership. I think if I were to give it the point 2 and other coaching things, it would be the concept of, as an operation, as a business, you've got to have a mission and you've got to have a set of values. And you've got to enlist your team to be carrying out and embodying those values. Because once you've done that, now you have a company culture that's really attractive. It's like, it's like an aroma that just goes through the halls and the smell is wonderful to everybody. And so if you don't have a good set of values and a mission that we're all trying to accomplish together, it's really tough to have a culture where people care. And I think in our society today, people caring and showing up for work is becoming more and more challenging. And so as leaders and managers, being able to bridge the gap between somebody's role and their why in the organization and how it ties back to the company's core values and its missions is such an important thing.
I love that. And now it becomes an advantage for us in the marketplace because it's more rare today than maybe it was before. I want to say thank you for joining us on the episode of The Business Coach. I love the conversation that we have. I love the pragmatic perspective you bring, the values-driven approach you bring. So I just want to say on behalf of the audience, thank you for spending the last 45 minutes with us here on this episode. We really value your time.
Well, thank you, David. It's always a pleasure, and wish everybody the best of luck in their businesses. It can be tough, but you just got to keep going. Good things are around the corner.
You said it just right. So everybody, we'll see you next week on The Business Coach.